I thought about waiting until after I finished watching through the series to talk about it on disc, but I've actually seen this before. What am I talking about today? It is a series called The Starlost. Now, I am a pretty strong sci-fi nerd, and I have been for a long time. Some of my earliest memories of television were of watching reruns of the original series, Star Trek. For years, it was on every weekday afternoon at 4 o'clock. No, 5 o'clock. Sorry, 4 o'clock was Scooby-Doo. 5 o'clock was Star Trek. Not a huge fan of this design on DVD shelves or packs. But I'd never heard of the Starlost until a few years back. I mean, I say a few years now. I guess it's probably close to 20. I'd never heard of it. I don't think it was really shown widely. Somebody at some point said like it only appeared, I don't know, on the West Coast or something like that. Canadian-produced science fiction television series that broadcast in 1973 on CTV in Canada and NBC in the United States. I feel like the NBC in the United States may have been West Coast, because I feel like nobody I talked to had ever heard of it. And, folks that would have known. For the first time, all 16 episodes are available in this collection. Some of these episodes have not been seen since their original air dates. So, cool. This show had Keir Dullea, I always worry I don't say his name correct, from 2001, and a bunch of other folks would show up in random episodes. And there's a bunch of Star Trek crossover, if memory serves. I want to say, I think Walter Koenig shows up, maybe some other folks, and I feel like some of the writers came across. Now, this show does have a certain level of infamy, largely due to one of its creators. Now, if you're a fan of the channel and you've watched my videos before, you may have heard my occasional bits of shade directed to a certain creative force out there, one Mr. Harlon Ellison. Now, I will be the first to admit that there are some cool things that Harlon Ellison has been involved in, some cool things that he wrote. He had some wild ideas. Great. But I will be the first to admit, I think as a human being, he seemed like a completely miserable bastard. At some point, if you have as many problems with people as he did, you've got to realize that the problem is you, and it's not everyone else. But Ellison, to the day he died, as far as I can tell, never understood that he was the problem. Anyhow, I mention that because he is not credited on this show. I believe he's credited as Cordwainer Bird, which is like he took the name thinking, as was typical of him, thinking he was quite clever. Because it's like a reference to something, but, with Ellison, who knows? But he took his name off of it because he, of course, ran into creative problems, blah, blah, blah. It's the same story every time you ever hear about Harlon Ellison working on a project. It's the same, he always had exactly the same list of problems. Everyone else was an idiot but him. Nobody understood his genius, So he is not credited as being like one of the creative forces behind this, but he was. So I think the show's pretty cool. Now, does it suffer from coming out in 1973 and being made by CTV? It does. It does suffer from that. It's got a low budget. It's not always great. It reuses special effects from the movie Silent Running. But it was a cool idea. It was a really cool idea for a show, and I wish it had caught on because I could see it have going in some really interesting directions. Now, my problems with Ellison aside, he did put out a version of it. I noticed the artist is not credited on the front cover because, of course, they're not. Heaven forbid you take away from Ellison. Harlon Ellison's Phoenix Without Ashes. This is essentially the if it's been a while since I've read this, but I believe it's essentially the pilot episode from the series told as a story, illustrated by Alan Robinson. And here's some more credits, coloring and lettering, and everybody else. So I enjoyed this story quite a bit. It's not a new idea. I mean, he's dead, so he's not going to be able to sue me. But guess what, Harlan? Your idea wasn't that original when you had it. But it's a cool concept. People living on a generation ship who don't understand that they're on a generation ship it's a cool concept. There's it's Heinlein, I think, originally, but I heard it as an episode of, I want to say One Step Beyond. X-1. I think it was on a radio show X-1, an episode called, I believe, The Universe. I think it was called The Universe. And it has a similar thing where it's folks don't understand. They're like working in the guts of the ship, but they don't understand they're on a giant starship. It's a cool concept, but it's not a new concept. And it wasn't a new concept in 1973. But anyhow, my problems with Ellison aside, which are many, it is a cool idea. This is a pretty decent little graphic novel, although I believe this was it. And it's not one of those things where it is wrapped up at the end, I feel like. And again, it's been a while since I've read the graphic novel, but I don't believe they wrap up at the end of this. And it's the kind of thing where it feels like there needs to be more. And that's what the show feels like there needed to be more. Again, it does suffer from television, 1973. It's more episodic than would be nice. It's one of those things, there are things out there. People complain about remakes upon remakes, and a lot of times they're not wrong. My goodness, we're about to get another Superman movie. Do we need another Superman movie? I don't ever need another Superman movie. Like, not ever. Ever. There are so many. And I get it. I get people being frustrated with remakes. I am not against remakes, however. I think some remakes are fantastic, and there are some things that are ripe for remaking. And I would say that the Starlost would be one of those things. I would love to see somebody do a contemporary, part of that whole Prestige TV, the 12-episode season or something like that. I would love to see like a 3-season arc of this story with a beginning, middle, and end. Because I think that it would be nice to have an end, and I think a 3-season arc would be a great way to do it. Is that going to happen? I mean, man, I think there's like 15 or 20 of us out here who have this set, and so probably not. But it is a cool idea. And now that Ellison's dead, he won't sue everybody involved because they stole his idea, quote unquote. Gosh. Anyway, Starlost, have you seen it? Have you heard of it? I would recommend checking it out. Take it with a grain of salt. It's know what you're getting into. Television series, 1973, made in Canada, low budget, but pretty cool. I am always willing to forgive budget shortfalls and wonky special effects and all of that if there's some fun, clever ideas, if you've got a good cast, all of that. Those are the things that are important to me. The ideas, the cast. I don't care if the set looks cardboard. I don't care if the laser beams are bad superimpositions or something. I don't care. I like the story. I like the actors. I like that sort of thing. And, Keir Dullea was a cool actor. I mean, he's still around. He was a cool actor. Strange presence on film, but a compelling one. And I don't know what the deal is. I don't know if he was one of those guys who stayed mostly with theater. I don't think I've ever heard anybody say anything bad about him, but he didn't really work a ton. I feel like he got a lot of work in the 70s, late 60s, early 70s, and then kind of disappeared. I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe he's been out there the whole time, but I feel like I've only seen him in a couple of things in the last 40 years. I think he shows up at AFI Silver more often than I've seen him show up in movies. But I always thought he was cool. So, plus, look at that 70s mustache. All right, that's all I've got for today. Same business as always. If you want to support the channel in any way, that'd be swell. And if not, hey, just pop in and say hi. Until next time, take care.